Hello out there.
Hi.
Look who I'm here with.
Yep, it's me.
Well, it's really
Yay.
Django, not just in the chat.
Really, Django. Yeah.
Ru-
Why we finally apologized for the incredibly offensive thing that she did that we've been feuding over for months.
Hey, it's not my fault that you don't understand that Krennic is better.
I mean, it's not my fault that all of Star Wars canon suggests that Tarkin is better. You know.
Actually, I thought about you. I was streaming Dishonored on my other channel, and there's a character in it named Callista, and I was like, Django needs to be here because, like, literally, she gets talked about because you talk to a guy and he's like, "Have you met my niece Callista? She's hot." Like, not in those words, but that's effectively what happens. I was like, if Django was here,
is she a ghost?
She could be, but I mean, depending on how I choose to play the game, she could be. Quick housekeeping note: my internet was misbehaving a little bit, so if at some point in time you guys might just need to refresh the stream, but right now it's going strong. But if something happens, just try that before anything else. But we're here, the two of us, together, excited, because I recently beat KotOR 2 on the channel, and I thought it would be fun for us to chat about KotOR 2 now that that's done before we move on to the next game.
I mean, it is, after all, the Mary Poppins of games. You know, practically perfect in every way.
Except for all the parts that aren't completed and that sort of thing. I've actually never played KotOR 2 without the restoration mod.
Yeah, which was interesting for me watching you play it because I've never played it with the restoration mod.
Interesting, yeah. Because I got KotOR, I still got KotOR 1 well after it was out, but I was in high school. And I played it so many times, and I know that game so well. And KotOR 2, I really don't know as well, because I only played it, I think this is probably maybe my fourth time all the way through it.
Yeah, I still have this.
Nice.
This original Xbox version from, what is this, 2004?
Right.
Yeah.
Where I can show you guys the version I have. I can't pull it off the shelf. But the version I have is loading. But, no, I got it when it came or I got it on Steam, and then through the Steam Workshop, I got the restoration mod. So, it's interesting in that light, because KotOR 1 was so popular that they kind of pushed through it. Here, this should work. This is the version I have. There we go. Now no one can see us. They can see my Steam page. Yeah, they basically, what happened, for those of you who don't know, is KotOR 1 was crazy popular. They wanted to make a sequel. I don't know if it was BioWare couldn't or wouldn't make it as fast as they wanted, so they went to Obsidian. Obsidian made the game and rushed the game. And so there were whole plot lines you would play through in KotOR 2 that were just incomplete. And eventually a bunch of fans got together and did I think it was called Project Gizka, but it was the restoration project, and they went into all the game files, because there were like whole bits that had audio files that were just never turned into a game, and they used the elements from the game to finish the game. Well, finish the game as best they could, and fix a lot of the glitches. And it's really cool that it got supported and not like taken down or whatever. I guess because they didn't make money off of it, they could get away with it. But that's the only version of the game I played.
Well, and I would think it would make it more likely for people to buy the game in the first place.
Yeah.
The existence of the mod. I mean, because you didn't, you've never played it without it. So I would imagine there are some people who would not have played it without, the existence of it. But,
well, it's kind of funny because there's a lot of games where I don't like mods that change the content. Like when I play KotOR 2, I will use cosmetic mods, but I don't like to use mods that make the game easier or harder. I like to just play the game as the game was built to be. But with KotOR 2, I was like, well, this is what they wanted the game to be. They just didn't have time to make it what it was.
So you wouldn't want those Skyrim mods that change the dragons into Thomas the Tank Engine stuff? Is that your speed?
I mean, it's still cosmetic. I was watching one of my favorite gaming channels. One of the chicks on it is terrified of spiders, and so she has like a Skyrim mod that turns all the spiders into something else. And it's the only reason why she got through the game.
I think my favorite Skyrim mod changes all the trees into hands. So it's just a bunch of like disembodied hands reaching up from the ground.
That's terrible. Why would you want that?
I don't know, but it's there, so why not?
It's horrifying. There's some other good KotOR 2 mods I've considered. Like there's a whole Skip Paragus mod.
Oh yes, please.
That basically gives your character approximately how much experience you would have and how much loot and money you would have, and then you just start afterwards.
Yep, I have a dark side save of Paragus and a light side save of Paragus, so that I never have to play Paragus again. It just maxed out what I would want to do on either playthrough, without having to do it.
And it's kind of too bad because there's parts of Paragus I didn't hate. Like I liked meeting Atten, I liked some of the conversations in it. It's just that Paragus was so long, and I guess KotOR 1, you spend a long time before you get your lightsaber or any Jedi powers, but it also makes sense because when you're playing it, at least for the first time, you in theory don't know you're Force sensitive, and so you're not sitting there like, where's my lightsaber? You're like, let's go save Bastila so I can get a Jedi in my party and have a lightsaber. But when you get to KotOR 2, you're like, okay, but I want a lightsaber. And then the background of your character is, you're the Jedi exile. I'm like,
right.
Okay.
But then you also play like the first hour without clothes, right? So it's a struggle though.
Yeah.
And a lot of games are like that, where you start off and like your skill set, is so low that it's hard to do that. But then, I love playing as T3. Like I think that's an interesting way to do that level too. But those like discrete parts are so separate before they intersect, and it lasts for so long before you see how those things connect that it's like too much. Like if it was just a little bit less, but.
No, I like a lot of what that game does overall. Like, I like even later in the game when you're on Duxon and you split up and you send like 3 of your party members to the Sith tomb, and then you storm the castle. And I like that idea, and I liked it felt like there were ways to use your party members more. But then it was just like there were times where it felt forced, because then there's a part on Nar Shaddaa, which is also so long. Where you're forced to play as Mira, and I it's probably great if you like Mira, but I don't like Mira, so I dread that part every time. I'm like, how can I just get through this to get to be me again?
Yeah. I really like Nar Shaddaa is probably one of my favorite planets in KotOR 2. Yeah. And I think part of that is because I like playing as Mira in that, and I like, the fight with Hanhar and stuff like that.
Yep.
But I also think one of the things I like about KotOR 2, and I know we don't want this to just be a compare one game to the other kind of thing, but one of the things I really like about KotOR 2 is, one of the things that you've told me is better about XCOM 2 is that it incentivizes you to use more of your party members.
Yep.
Not that you have to, but like the way that KotOR 2, which this is a story point as much as anything, but the way that you can make basically any member of your party into a Jedi or a Force user who's not already, it incentivizes you to take more people, more places to try to get those, personal influence points.
Yep.
Like that whole system. It's part of the story, but I like that. And that's just absent from the first game. Yeah. It didn't have like people reacted to your relative light or darkness, but you didn't have, the individual influence over the characters. And I think that's a really well done system. And like there are some characters who I would not have ever played with in KotOR 2 if it wasn't for that. But because there was that, it makes me appreciate those characters more.
What I liked Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say the first time I played it through, though, I didn't realize that was a thing. And so I played the entire game through without converting anyone. So, like, that was a different experience.
What I was going to say, what I like about the system, and I like the system overall. I don't know that it's perfect, but it was also, when the game came out, it was pretty new. So I can't really blame it that much. But there's certain things where, like, if you weren't at the right planet with the right party member with the right thing, like, you would entirely go back, which is maybe more realistic, but I don't know. But what I like about the system in of itself, and this was where the game I think was a little bit ahead of its time, is the game almost has an in-story reason for why that happens. And as we talk about the character of Exile, how Mika, she would, I mean, I guess it's hard to say canon because it's Legends canon, but canonically in Legends canon, Exile is a woman. And she will, just like the way that it's always talked about how she inspires everyone that's around her, influences everyone that's around her, but also is just like this beacon where it would make sense that people who happen to be Force sensitive would fall into her sphere of influence. And so instead of it, they easily could have gotten away with it just being, and you can just make your party members Force sensitive because that's fun. But instead, like, if you're really paying attention to the story and to the character that you're crafting, it also makes sense within as to why all of these characters suddenly have powers.
Right, and I think this speaks to why I enjoy this game so much. And and if you pressed me, I would say I probably like this game more. But that's because, I mean, I don't think this is heresy to say. I think we can have differences of opinions. But Exile speaks to me in the way that Revan speaks to you. Right, and so like I connect with the idea of Exile as a character so much that I really enjoy this because like just like the whole twist of KotOR 1 is Revan's character story. Like and the whole game is built around that character beat. The whole game of KotOR 2 is built around that aspect of Exile's character too. Like this idea that you think she's been cut off from the Force and then you realize like that was not anything they did to her. Like she like she terrified herself subconsciously and walked away from it, but she can't deny this effect that she has on everyone around her. Like that's that type of charisma. Like Revan has that type of charisma too. But like people followed Revan and the Jedi Council didn't really know why. But they are such interconnected characters in that way too. It's one of the reasons why I like the Revan novel, is because especially in the second half of that, you get to see what their friendship actually is like because you don't get that in either one of the games. Apart from that place in the Corbin caves in the second game where you go through all the the might have beens or whatever. But I like Exile just. Like the character just speaks to me. This person who, steps away from her own power but can't deny her own influence because of her. It was friendship the whole time, right? Like it was love the whole time. Like that's the relationship she has with people. Like defines everything.
I like too what you're saying with Revan. I thought the game did an excellent job of. It almost like accepted that it was in Revan's shadow in a way, to not make it a direct sequel where you're playing as Revan again, which had to have been a risk. But also kind of made sense because then you can once again make your own character. You're not beholden to what happened in the previous game. And instead of just going completely new and be like, we don't, blah, 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 what's up with Revan is a part of the mystery of the story. It's not the main mystery of the story, and it's not the main thing that gets resolved, but it's important. And then even just the simple questions you have with that at the beginning of the game that determine was Revan dark, light, or man or woman, I think work really well to kind of let players keep that experience or experiment with a different experience. And you feel connected because you're this person who was important to Revan rather than playing as Revan again.
Right. I think if we're talking about game mechanics still a little bit too, I think one of the things that I like about KotOR 2, which I know is one of the reasons you prefer KotOR 1 is I like everything, like so much of the game being randomized,
right?
In terms of like the loot that you find.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I know like the way you play games, like you like that you have every crate in KotOR 1 memorized, and you know that there's a med pack in there, and you get this sword in there.
Yep.
Like I like, and I mentioned this in the stream of like your last gameplay, mm-hmm. that you can get some like really, really awesome stuff in the early game, and then in the last game you're on Malachor, and you're like, oh, here's a repair kit that I'm never going to use because I'm not going to play as a droid again.
Right.
But I don't know. I like this idea that it's a little bit more like a loot table kind of thing, just because that speaks to me as like a tabletop role playing game player,
right?
Where you get sort of the randomness of the loot table of it all. But I don't know. I like that it mixes it up because it makes it a little bit different of a game every time you play it, even if you're making the same choices. Like the outcome is even if it's just marginally different every time.
It's funny that I do prefer how KotOR 1 does it, and yet you mentioned one of my favorite games is XCOM and XCOM 2, and everything in XCOM 2 is randomized. But I feel like when I'm telling a story, like when I'm playing a story game, there's a part of me that's like, I want to play that story like you go back to your favorite novel, and sometimes I kind of want it to be the same story. I don't think in 2 it was so bad that it bothers me, but it'll be like, oh, there's this armor I really want, and I just never get it because you can only get it as loot. But I feel like KotOR 1 also depended on you having certain things at a time, because like in KotOR 1 you had to buy T3 for 2,000 credits, unless you're stealing him, and then the same with HK. You can knock him down in price, but you need to have like this amount of money, and so the game can't randomize how much money you're getting, because if you don't have enough money, you can't, like, you can literally get into an unwinnable scenario.
Right.
Where KotOR 2, I don't think really has any money walls for anything story-wise that I can think of.
Not that I can think of either. But like I remember, like I don't think I commented in this during the stream, but like when you got Malik's armor in your, like I don't think I've ever encountered that before.
Really?
And so like I was wondering if that was a restoration mod thing.
Oh, it could be, because I've gotten it a couple of times.
Or if that was just in the 5 or 6 times I've played through this game, I've just never gotten that randomly.
Yeah. No, I've gotten that.
Because I was kind of jealous because you got it and couldn't use it because you were light side. I'm like, well, I want to know what that is.
Well, that's another thing to talk about too. So like, what would it be, 2 years ago now on the channel? Some time ago, I played KotOR 1.
Right.
And I played KotOR 1, and after having played KotOR, I mean, a lot of times, however many times it takes to memorize what's in every loot crate through the whole game, I never played it dark side. I tried it once and lasted like 10 minutes, and then I was like, no, I'm not going to do this. So playing it on dark side was an experience. But I ended up not liking it because, yes, you're overpowered, and that's neat. I never feel particularly overpowered on like the kind of turn-based combat KotOR is anyway, because I'm always just like, okay, then I sit and wait for my turn, and then I sit and wait for my turn. Like, you want to make me feel overpowered, like, don't make me wait for my turn, I guess. But I struggled in KotOR 1 because I felt like anytime I hit a cool story, I was just killing people instead of getting the story.
Yeah.
But you were saying that KotOR 2 would have been maybe a little bit more fun if I had tried it on the dark side.
I mean, I think KotOR 2 offers a richer dark side experience than KotOR 1 for a couple of reasons. One, I think with the dark side playthrough in the first game, which by the way, get us to 5,000 subscribers and she'll play KotOR 2 dark side. There you go. I'm tossing that out there.
Honestly, sure. That's because that's 4,000 subscribers from where we are now. So.
I know. I tried to pick a goal that would be plausible enough that I might get you to agree to it. That's what friendship is you pressure your friends to do things that they don't want to do. But with KotOR 1, to me, I think one of the reasons, which I didn't even realize, honestly, I think I might have frozen.
I can hear you, but you're just frowning. Can you hear me? I don't think you can hear me. We can hear you, though. Hold on.
Am I here?
Yes.
Are we back?
Are you here? Okay. We could hear
Can you hear me now? There we go. Yes. Okay.
You were frozen.
Well, there you go. So what I was thinking, though, was that I didn't even realize until I watched your Dark Side playthrough. Mm-hmm. And again, this just speaks to how few times I've played KotOR 1 compared to you. Mm-hmm. But I didn't even realize that there were like certain story beats that you just didn't get at all.
Yeah.
Like that there weren't like options for everything. Like you either get this story or this story. Mm-hmm. Like there are some things you just don't get at all.
Yeah.
But I also think because the twist is that you were the Lord of the Sith, like playing as the Lord of the Sith changes the Revan narrative in a way that's different. Mm-hmm. Because Revan's story is a redemptive story.
Right.
And the redemption doesn't work if you don't redeem yourself. Right. And so like I feel like that's one of the reasons why the first game is less effective from a story perspective. Mm-hmm. And then also just from like a gameplay perspective, I feel like there are more of the sort of mirror storylines in KotOR 2.
Yeah.
When you play as the dark side, like you're not losing out on story the same way. And it's more about the manipulation of the dark side. Mm-hmm. Like it's less, like how you said, I just kill people instead of doing the cool story thing. Right. Like you get a different cool story thing. Gotcha. Like when you think about like with Telos, mm-hmm. like you I don't want to spoil stuff for a game that's been out for 16 years, but like you poison a planet rather than helping save a planet.
Right.
Like there are mirror story points for things in KotOR 2, I think, in a way that doesn't necessarily exist for everything in KotOR 1. Mm-hmm. But also I think given the nature of KotOR 2, as much as it is about exile, is also about the nature of the Force, and I know that's one of the reasons you like the story in it less is because things are well. I'll let you clarify in a second.
Okay.
But I think the way that the story is so bound up in the game's description of the Force makes it also just as interesting if exile chooses to be a Sith.
Right. Because
Kreia is Sith no matter what you do. Right. You still face off against the Sith at Malachor no matter what you do.
Right.
And like Kreia's attempt to destroy the Force using exile is the same no matter if you are light or dark. Mm-hmm. So it's not just that those elements are the same, but like one of the best instances of this, and if you've played the game, I think this is something you'll be familiar with, but there's a moment when you first show up on Nar Shaddaa, like where like there's a beggar at the port, and if you give the person the money, then like Kreia shows you, this person got mugged, and they wouldn't have gotten mugged if you didn't give them the money.
Right.
But the alternative, like Kreia also lectures you if you don't give them the money, because then they go and mug someone, because like dude's still got to eat, right? And so like there's a lesson that Kreia, as manipulative as she's being the entire time, is trying to teach you either way. And so you aren't missing out on that. And there's influence points. Like I don't think that there's any character you can't still convert if you're playing on the dark. Maybe Baldur. I don't know. People who know the game better than me could correct me.
I've always struggled. I've never been able to get him force powers in any of my playthroughs.
I don't know that I have either, just because as much as I like how the game incentivizes you to use different characters, he stays on the ship.
His voice creates a physical reaction in me that is unpleasant, especially with headphones.
But so I think from a story perspective and from the perspective of why I like Exile as a character, I think it is I won't say a better experience if you play it through on the dark side compared to the light side experience, but is a richer dark side experience than the dark side experience offered to you in the first game.
I can see. So I do prefer KotOR 1 pretty solidly overall. A lot of that is nostalgia built in just because of the nature of how I played it. I don't mind the philosophy discussions in KotOR 2. I think they're pretty strong. It's almost like the people who get, like, what drives me nuts is when people play KotOR 2 and try to talk about it as if KotOR 2 definitively says anything, and then try to tell me what KotOR 2 definitively says, because I don't feel like KotOR 2 definitively says anything really, other than maybe like Exile and Nihilus are weird. And that's something I kind of noticed more in this playthrough than I had in the past ones, is that Nihilus and Exile are really two sides of the same coin, right? Nihilus destroys and devours everything, and that's what they thought Exile did, but Exile really is more of a, like, she does siphon off energy, but I don't feel like she's devouring it and consuming it and taking it. It's more of like she's bringing these things out from others. And that was something I kind of picked up on more in this playthrough that I thought was really interesting. But, like, there's so many people, like, Kreia has so many interesting things to say, and, like, what you were saying, where I think about that mugging incident a lot when I think about, like, Force ethics. But there's so many people who are like, but Kreia, like, she just really got it and gets the Force. I'm like, Kreia was trying to murder the Force. Like, I don't know that you really are picking up what the game was, like, the only time the game annoys me, and we've had this conversation many times, is I hate the resolution of the Korriban tomb. I hate it so much. Just so much. I don't mind the planet. I think it's fun to play. I think the story is interesting. But that last encounter where you know that Kreia is a Sith, but you get light side points for defending her, and if you attack, like, so you murder all of your friends to save a Sith and get light side points, or you, like, stand with your friends against a Sith and kill a Sith, which is what you're supposed to do at the end of the game anyway, and you get dark side points. And it annoys me so much. And maybe that's part of the point, but even if it's the part of the point, it still annoys me. I would rather you just don't get influence points at all, and you're left to go, did I do the right thing, or did I not do the right thing? You know, and kind of leave that up for yourself. But that's the only part where the philosophy of the game gets on my nerves.
Well, and I think to say a few things to that, I think as far as that in particular thing is involved, I think one of the takeaways is that following the light in the dark is not always as simple.
Right.
Like I think in that you can say that Yoda got some dark side points in that arc. You know, in season 6 of the Clone Wars, and he ends up, you know, in the terms of the game, he ends up with a net light side points. But like there's some back and forth there. But I also think it obscures the fact that I also believe that Kreia is manipulating what you're seeing in the caves. Yeah. And so, like, I think that she's prompting you to get you to a place where you'll defend her.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way.
But I think one of the things that's interesting to me, if we talk about the broader philosophy of the game, that I think a lot of people miss, is that Kreia's wrong.
Right.
Right. Like, she is incorrect. Like, she dies because either way she dies. Right. Because she's wrong. Whether you play it on the light side or the dark, she dies because she's wrong. Right. She doesn't kill the Force, and it opens up the idea of could she have I don't know that she could have in the way she thinks she could have in the first place, you know, and she's wrong about Nihilus. She's wrong about Scion. She's wrong about Exile. Like Kreia, she's wrong about herself. Yep. Like she makes a very principled point, and you can almost see her, you know, in a different world having these, you know, she was Revan's master, right? Like the Jedi Council's familiar with her. You can imagine an earlier time where she's sitting around, you know, in a library somewhere with Atris having philosophical conversations about the nature of the Force, right? You know, like a Plato or Socrates kind of thing. But at the end of the day, she's wrong, right? It's like she's incorrect. She misunderstands Exile. She misunderstands Nihilus and Scion. Like she misunderstands the triumvirate. That's why she's able to be betrayed, because she thinks it's something that she misunderstands Revan, right? Like the whole thing is that she's wrong in her interpretation of, not just in sort of a, you know, a light side, dark side, you know, dark side users are mistaken, or like, you know, Yoda's point in the Empire Strikes Back or something. You know, she's misunderstood. Right. And I think it raises some interesting questions, but I think Exile is the answer to those questions, not Kreia. Right. Right. And I think that's why Exile being a counterpoint to Nihilus works so well, because where Nihilus wants to devour, Exile can't help but establish connections.
Right.
Like that is the nature of the Force. And like the nature of the Force is to connect all things. Like that's the very first thing we learn about the Force in Empire Strikes Back is that it or even from Obi-Wan in A New Hope is it surrounds us. It binds the universe together. Like and that is the story of Exile.
Right.
You know?
No, I
and Krea's wrong. Like whether or not she could functionally have killed the Force, I think is a bigger question and depends on what you think the nature of the Force is. But even separate from that question, she's wrong. She's wrong. She thinks she can manipulate this nature that the Force creates in Exile, and she's just wrong.
Well, and I think what comes into it is I feel like, and I might be a little bit off on this. This is definitely more your wheelhouse than mine with this game. But Kreia, to me, feels like the person who doesn't take into account people's intentions. And I think that's part of like what frustrates me about Korriban, and what frustrates me with some of the choices in the game is it's assuming your intentions behind your actions. And I mean, there's the cliche, the road to hell is paved on good intentions. And I'm not trying to say like just because you have good intentions and you wanted good things, that means only good things can happen. But when it comes to like the corruption that comes from the dark side, I think intentions still can matter for something. Where even when you look at a figure like Anakin, he fell to the dark side because something that he had supposedly good intentions for took him to the dark. I think the fact that he had better intentions is why he could still be brought back. The same with Ben and Kylo, to the degree that we understand why he fell. Where Kreia, I don't think sees that. I think for her, she's you did the wrong thing because you gave him money, and you did the wrong thing because you didn't give him money, because there must be some sort of like either an absolute where these actions are a certain thing, or maybe just the absolute is that these things always happen and there's nothing you can do about it. But like your internal heart doesn't factor in anything, where Exile, because of the connections she could make, is really the counterpoint to her belief system, where everything Exile does inspires something up out of whoever Exile encounters. It really, Kreia would have been better off using Nihilus for what her goals were than Exile.
I mean, and I think to that point too, I think Kreia, and the way that a lot of dark side users, especially Sith users, end up, Kreia wants to blame someone else for the consequences of her actions. She is mad at the Force. Right? And that's 100%. Not a and that's not to say that different. I don't want to get into like too much of a religious discussion, but I don't think it's the same thing as saying I'm mad at God because this bad thing happened. Kreia is mad at the Force because it didn't do what she thought it was supposed to do, and so now she wants to kill it because it didn't. Like she wasn't able to rule the galaxy the way that Revan almost did. Like she thought the Triumvirate was going to be a way for her to do that, and she got mad because she didn't get what she wanted. Whereas Exile denies it. Well, not denies that, but like she accepts her role. Like she this is I love Exile, and we've talked about this I think maybe in our conversation on the Revan novel, long time ago, whenever that was. But Exile goes back. She's the only one that does. Like, and that's why she gets punished, because they have to make an example out of her, because she's the only one that goes back. She's the only one that says, whether this war was good or bad, I did something I know was against the rules, and I'm here to accept whatever my punishment is for that. And so you have those counterpoints too, of Kreia, who even at the end can't accept blame for her role in anything. Versus Exile, whose whole story is, I can only worry about the consequences, and I can only worry about what my role in things was. And that's it's one of the things I love about like Master and Apprentice and Jedi Lost too, in the story of Dooku, is when Dooku is like begging Yoda in Jedi Lost, like why are we not intervening here? And Yoda's like, well, we can't. And like it's a focus on the consequences that I think is true of Exile too. Exile can't help but go to war. It's not a power grab. It's I've got to do something. And then to the extent that she realizes it was a mistake after Malachor, she goes back and says, I've still, like, even if it was justified, I've got to own up for it. And I think those are philosophical differences too.
Well, and Exile was never, I know Exile followed Revan, but Exile was never a Sith, right? Because Malachor was before Revan came back and started the Jedi Civil War. So, you know, you have Exile, who was a Jedi and went and followed other Jedi and fought as a Jedi, even if it wasn't within the rules of a Jedi, versus Kreia, who was a Jedi and that didn't work out, and then was a Sith and then that didn't work out, and then becomes like this weird third party thing and just wants everything to go away, rather than try to build something out of it. And I think that's what makes her such a unique character, and I get why so many people gravitate towards her, even when I think they misunderstand her sometimes. Because usually you have the character who's like, you know, you're Jolie Bendo, who's like, well, the Jedi don't really have it figured out, you know. But then Kreia is like, no, what if we just had none of them? What if we just set everything on fire and killed it all and see what's left? Which even among Darksiders isn't that common. Maybe some stuff from Knight Errant, the John Jackson Miller stories. But really, there's not another character like her in any lore that I'm aware of.
I mean, it's a very Nietzschean, like, nihilistic kind of point, though.
Yeah.
Like because, like, it's a will to nothingness, to use, you know, Nietzsche's example of nihilism. Like, I would rather nothing exist than what exists.
Right.
Like I'm choosing the absence of this thing, especially for her, because of what she feels like it has done to her personally.
Right.
You know, it's different than the nihilist, you know, whose name comes from that. You know, nihilist, it has just this hunger. Like, he is this pure, like, appetite that needs to devour other things in order to feel his own power.
Right.
Like Kreia's not that. Like, Kreia is just like, I just want it all gone. Like, it's better off if none of this existed than you know, for it to happen this way. And I think the Star Wars, and this overstates her role, but when you talked about her as this kind of third party thing, what I would contrast this with is the Bendu in Rebels, right? The Bendu says that, you know, I'm other. Like, I'm above. I'm separate from the way you think about the Force. Like, your whole Force thing's over here, and I'm back over here. Yep. I'm doing Bendu things in Bendu Town, and you know, and you can do whatever you want.
Right.
And you know, and Kreia's third partiness is different than that. You know, I think that's a way of thinking. Or even, you know, like our old pal Fred the Jovial Sith, who you know, who wants to be a Sith, but you know, just wants to be friends with people and bake cookies.
Exactly.
You know, like that's different too. Like, and it's one of the reasons why one of the things I don't like about the game is when you go back to fight Kreia at the end, it acknowledges her as Darth Treya again. Like, even just on her, like, health bar, I'm like, she's not that anymore. Like, she is not a member of the Sith Triumvirate anymore. She has become something else, and it is the something else that she is when she's dead and you wake her up on Paragus. Like from that moment on, she is already something else.
Yep. I like to think about the thing, because, like, she gets, one of the things she talks about that I'll think about even when I'm not playing the game, is she talks about how there always needs to be a dark Treya. There always needs to be that person who's willing to betray. And I really want to know where that comes from for her, and I'm kind of curious if you have thoughts on that, because it's such an odd thing to be like, well, we always need the one that's willing to betray everybody. I'm like, really? Like, I get the one who's, like, willing to burn the bridges, or the one who's willing to make the hard choices, but, like, or even, like, a trickster, because, like, a lot of mythologies have a trickster god, but, like, why a betrayer? Why would we always need a Darth Treya?
I mean, one, I think it's one of those things that she's wrong about, but also I think the interesting thing to me about that is I don't know who she betrays. Like, her story is not one of her betraying people, but of her being betrayed.
Right.
Because, like, the Jedi Council, I mean, we don't really know what her story is with Revan and the Jedi You know, even I've never made it far enough in her influence tree to get to the end of that story altogether to know like what went down with her. I'm sure I could look it up, but like, so we don't know all of that story, but like with the triumvirate, they betray her. Right. With Exile, like it's a surprise that she's, I mean, or rather it's not, you know, what's, you know, the 10 most likely people that totally won't betray you later on or whatever.
Like, yeah, you meet her and you're like, this woman, she's not lying to me.
But like when she like betrays you, like I see that as Exile just going in a different way, and she realizes that she can't use Exile the way she wants. So I don't know who she actually betrays the whole time, you know, except for Scion, herself
or Scion, maybe Scion.
Yeah, I mean, but even Scion, like Scion cuts her hand off. Like I think he gets the best of her. Yeah, you know, it's one of the things. Just as a side note, too, I feel like Scion doesn't get his fair shake in this game in the way that Nihilus and Kreia do, you know, because he ends up being effectively, you know, a mini boss twice, rather than like somebody you actually have to contend with. And it's less obvious what his role in the triumvirate was, too.
Yeah. Well, I really want to know what Nihilus was like at the like management meetings. Yeah. You know, I feel like he was the guy who just stayed on lunch orders for half an hour.
He's my student now that logs on to Zoom and never says or does anything. They're just there, just a presence in the call, just staring blankly. It's like, oh, this takes me back to like StarWars.com message boards days. What was the Nina Star?
Nina Star. Oh no, we lost him again. He'll come back in a hot second. He mentioned Nino Star, so this is why this happened. Django, come back. We lost him hard this time. At least this time he's not frowning. My internet took a hit too. Alright, are you there? I can kind of hear you. Okay, you're moving.
Am I back? Discord hates me.
Yeah, it happens.
It's the vines.
Hello, Zolan. Also to Ray and Mr. Rez and Bear, who I don't think I said hello to some time ago. You guys are still out there. But we're both doing well. We're discussing KotOR 2 and having internet hiccups. That's okay. But no, we were talking about like what role Scion would have in the triumvirate, because to me he would just be the attack dog role.
Yeah.
But otherwise I don't really know like what his ideas are. So like Scion, what are your thoughts on how we could subjugate this planetary system, you know? That's kind of how that would work, but
no.
I do, the more as I play it more, I'm getting more out of their relationships, and some of that is just inevitably the more time you spend with the story, the more stuff you pick up. I think some of it is still the nature of the story is kind of broken up, and so sometimes it's like, oh, I didn't pick up on that because they didn't really explain it well, because the game wasn't really finished, but I picked up on it this time.
Yeah.
And so, but I was enjoying this time through. What are your thoughts? Oh, go ahead. If you have any more thoughts on that, otherwise, I'm going to ask a different question about the mechanics.
Oh, I was just going to say, one of the things that strikes me about the unfinished nature of the game, too, is that I feel like the ending is like an 80s high school movie.
Yep.
Like where it says, you know, so-and-so grew up and became a CEO, but so-and-so, you know, worked at the local gas station forever, because, like, you just spend, like, your last 45 minutes just asking Kreia questions, and, like, that's how the game ends.
Assuming she's correct.
Well, yeah, but yeah, like it just ends up with exposition of things that never get shown, and like that, like I don't know how all of those stories would have been shown in a more finished game,
right?
But it speaks to the fact of it's just like I used to say about Shakespeare. Like Shakespeare was a really great playwright, but he didn't know how to write endings, so half of his plays just end well. Everybody dies, like. Like, I don't really know what to do, so I guess, 3/4 of these people have to die, and we'll pretend like that means it's a resolution. And I feel like that's kind of how KotOR 2 ends.
Yeah.
It's like, well, Kreia, who's lied to you the whole time, we'll just ask her how everybody ends up, and then I guess it'll end. Yay!
It's the end of the game. Oh, man. No, when I was playing through this time, I was getting annoyed because it's like all of your friends go without you to fight Kreia, and I'm like, why are you going without me? This is not explained at any point in time.
I mean, which is why I appreciated the Revan novel so much, because you get the end of Exile's story in a way that you don't get from the game.
Right.
And you get the, like Mandalore now. Like, you get to see more of that and how that plays out.
Yep.
In the novel, because the game doesn't give you that resolution.
As a complete aside, too, I was always impressed by that in the novel, because Drew Kaparshin, I think is how you'd say his last name, he wrote the novel, he wrote the first game, but he didn't write, I don't think he wrote the second one, because it went to Obsidian. So for him, just as a storyteller, to incorporate all of this stuff from, like, not his lore, I mean, also it's Lucasfilm, so he had to do it. But like, it was done in such a way where it didn't feel like, oh, I needed to do this. It felt like, oh no, I want to tell this story for this character that I didn't come up with, and like weave the two stories together.
Right.
What I was gonna ask is, one of the other major changes in the game too, they made it more relevant if you picked a male or a female character, in that if you play as a male character, you get an awesome companion, and if you play as a female character, you get dead weight. And which was kind of a bummer, because I chose to play it canon. I really missed. Usually, I play the game as a guy just for Handmaiden.
I mean, I think I both like it and don't like it. Mm-hmm. I like it in the sense that, from the heteronormative perspective of 2004, it makes it that much more interesting, because, like, if you play it as a man, you don't have that kind of inner relationship tension with Atten in the same way.
Right.
And so Handmaiden kind of takes that aspect of the Atten character away, whereas nobody would ever love Disciple in that way. And so, like, you don't have to worry about that.
Right.
Like, there's no tension there at all, because he's literally just around.
He's there.
And I think Handmaiden, though, is just such a more compelling character.
Yeah.
Like all around, this idea that they're supposed to be like specifically prohibited from using the Force.
Yep.
And like, when you convert, like, I stumbled into that.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, like I said earlier, the first time I played through, I didn't realize you can convert anybody.
Right.
And then I went back and played it again, and I'm like, oh, now I'm having more conversation with Handmaiden. Wait, she's a Jedi now. Wait, that's not like, like, it becomes a story thing, which I guess most people knew that going in. But like, that's an interesting story beat, is you have the person who has given up their Jedi abilities versus the person who has vowed not to take them in the first place.
Right.
And they both get them back, or they both, develop them. And that's just so much more interesting than, the grad student that you find locked in a room
in the library. No one even questions what he was eating all that time that he was locked in the library. We lost Django again.
Yeah.
There he is.
I'm here. No.
But, no, it's... Like, that is the one thing with Stream. I really wish we could have had Handmaiden, because she's just so much more... And I feel like there's room for her to be interesting, even if you don't have the romance storyline with her.
Yeah.
Especially because I think Handmaiden is part of what keeps Atris relevant. Because when you don't have a Handmaiden, Atris is just that chick who stole your car. And then you get away. And then for some reason later on in the game, you go back to the lady who stole your car. Only now she's talking to Sith holocrons for some reason.
Yeah.
But like, when you have Handmaiden, you have like the constant reminder of Atris.
Right.
And I 100%, like, man or woman, I think Atris had a thing for Exile. I feel like
I think so too.
I think that's pretty... It's not spelled out, it's definitely subtext, but I think it's pretty heavy subtext.
I mean, I think you can pick up on that some in the Revan novel too.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's definitely there, and I think it's a bad thing because if Handmaiden was less interesting of a character, or if Disciple gave you any reason to care about him at all, it would feel less of a mismatch.
Right.
Like if you had Juhani or also similarly boring character in the first game, you wouldn't care.
Right.
Right. But I mean, or the fact that like with that one character, like Juhani was like the first instance of almost same-sex relationship, right? Because you could sort of go down those, like, there's no reason why you couldn't do that both ways with Handmaiden, especially if it were being remade in 2020, so.
Especially because Handmaiden is a better character than Juhani. Like, there's a part of me that's always, like, they really tried to put, like, the first lesbian character in Star Wars, but they made her terrible.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that will always remember that.
Right. I mean, or I think, did you ever finish Force Collector?
I did. Yep.
Like even if Disciple had something like that, where there's something more interesting about, because otherwise he's literally just like a grad student, right? Like he's in grad school doing his thesis on Jedi Temple garbage, and you just stumble across him, and you're like, well, I guess you can come with me now.
Yeah, you're stuck here with no food, so I guess you can be with me.
Yeah.
And then it's supposed to be like this very pure, innocent, like boyish love, only he's like in his 30s or 40s, and it's just creepy. Yeah. And you're like, why are you? No, go over there and stay over there and stop talking to me.
I mean, he just stays in the cargo bay the whole time when I play this game. So.
Somehow Atten meeting me in my underwear was less creepy than the sum total of Disciple. And that says a lot.
Because Atten's pretty creepy about it when you first meet him.
But he's also like it's like like there's to me, I think when the person's like, hey, look, you're the one who showed up in your underwear, versus I'm just gonna boyishly stalk you and not understand the implications of my actions. I'm like, I know which one I'd rather deal with.
Right.
Oh man. But no, I thought that was an interesting thing. I think there's probably mods where I think you can get Handmaiden as a female player, but I haven't wanted to mess with that because I would assume the dialogue would match kind of wackily, and it wasn't really quite worth it to me. And I think in Legends canon, Disciple and Handmaiden both were companions of Exile. It's just in the game you can only get one or the other. But
I mean, in the Revan novel, the second half of the Revan novel starts with, well, Exile also had all these friends, but none of them can come help you now.
It was like a standalone Avengers movie. They were just all
right. And Handmaiden and Disciple are both mentioned there.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's where the canonicity of, they were both her companions.
Yeah. And it's also like they could have, I don't know, I feel like there was room to have both of them there, and then you just have and it's kind of funny how tame KotOR tries to be about it, because it's coming out at the same time as the Mass Effect games, which I've not played, but I know about. And you can do a lot in Mass Effect. And so it's just kind of funny. But I think that also comes with just the Star Wars brand. They're slower to want to rock the boat with that. But
unless ghosts are involved, then we can.
Then it's fine.
Then I can just jump head first.
Just totally, it's cool.
Ghosts and teenagers seem to be fine.
Oh, Legends canon. Oh, Legends canon.
And that was your favorite part of the little bit of Crystal Star that you read, right? Where Han almost has an affair?
Yep. Because, that book was pretty bad.
If that's somebody's least favorite part of Crystal Star, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
But so before we get done, I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you have any speculation of what other Star Wars game you might want to? Not that you have to commit to anything.
Oh,
but
I'm gonna stream Force. I don't know if you can hear me. We're gonna stream Force Unleashed 2 next, and that'll be fun because I've played Force Unleashed 1 quite a bit. We've streamed Force Unleashed 1, but I was just never able to get the second one, and so I'm going to play as Starkiller again, or rather clone Starkiller. And I'm excited because it'll be fun to play that blind. Come back, Django. Come back. Sorry. Discord really does hate his computer. It's pretty amusing. But yeah, that'll be the next thing we stream, and I'll probably do some kind of summary after it. I can't remember if Django has played Force Unleashed 2 or not, so I don't know if we'll be able to do a full-blown stream on it like we did with both KotOR games, and we did one for a stream like this after playing Fallen Order. But I'm excited to be able to play that one next. I think he went out. But there we go. That's the answer to the question. Well, I mean, we're at like an hour, so this is appropriate. Is he coming? He's thinking about it. Nope. Okay. Anyway, I think this is a good enough time to call the stream. But thank you guys for being here. And, or not. Is he going to come back on in time to say goodbye? There he is. He's on his phone. Yep. You're there we go. Okay, perfect. I was just saying it's about time to say goodbye anyway, but we got you back. I was saying I'm going to play Force Unleashed 2 next. I think we lost him again.
Yep. Discord hates me all around today.
It's all right. We'll go ahead and call it. But thank you for being on again, Django. I'm sure I'll force him to come back a couple of more times here. Thank you all for being here, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye. Bye.